My name is Lauren, and I live in a small, quiet town where everyone know each other by name and share warm greetings on every corner. I've always taken pleasure in hosting evening gatherings at my home, where delightful meals and heartfelt conversation bring everyone together. It was a warm summer evening when I decided to host another dinner party, inviting my closest friends. I had no idea that this night would turn into a mystery that still haunts me. I spent the entire day preparing for the party. The table was set with my best dishes, and the house smelled of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread. As dusk fell and soft golden light streamed through my windows, my friends began to arrive. Elena, David, Alice, and James were all there, along with a new friend, Tara, who had recently moved to town. Tara was a bit of a mystery. She was quiet and reserved, but I thought it would be nice to include her in our group. She seemed happy to be invited, and I hoped she would enjoy the evening with us. We all gathered around the table, laughing and sharing stories as we ate. The dinner went smoothly, with everyone enjoying the food and each other's company. After dessert, we moved to the living room to continue our conversations. Tara was unusually quiet, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe she was just shy, or perhaps she didn't feel comfortable yet. As the evening progressed, Tara's mood seemed to shift. She became tense and irritable, barely speaking and avoiding eye contact. I noticed but didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable by asking in front of everyone. Eventually, she stood up abruptly, muttering something about needing to leave. Before I could say anything, she was out the door, slamming it behind her. We all sat in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. After a few moments, we tried to brush it off and continued the evening, though the mood had shifted. The night eventually came to an end, and my friends said their goodbyes, still puzzled by Tara's sudden departure. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to check on Tara, hoping to find out what had upset her. I went to her house, but there was no answer when I knocked. Her car was in the driveway, but it seemed as if no one was home. I left, thinking she might just need some space. A few days passed, and I still hadn't heard from Tara. I reached out to my friends, but no one had seen or heard from her either. Concerned, I decided to call the police and report her missing. They took my statement and assured me they would look into it. Weeks turned into months, and there was still no sign of Tara. The police had searched her house, talked to neighbors, and followed every lead, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. My friends and I were left with more questions than answers. One evening, I found myself going through the events of that night over and over in my mind. What had caused her to leave so suddenly? I couldn't help but feel responsible, wondering if I had missed some sign, or if there was something I could have done to prevent it. Determined to find some answers, I started looking into Tara's past. I learned that she had moved to our town after a difficult breakup and was looking for a fresh start. She didn't have many friends, and her family lived far away. The more I learned, the more I realized how little I knew about her. One night, while I was alone in my house, I heard a noise outside. It was a faint rustling, like someone was moving through the bushes. My heart raced as I peered out the window, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. The noise stopped, and I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. The following nights, the noises continued. Footsteps, whispers, and the feeling of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there. My sleep was disturbed, and I felt on edge all the time. One evening, I found an old journal in Tara's house that the police had overlooked. It was filled with her thoughts and feelings, revealing a troubled mind. She wrote about feeling out of place, not just in our town, but in life. The entries grew darker, filled with paranoia and fear. The last entry was dated the night of the dinner party. It read, "I can't escape it. It's always watching, always waiting. I need to leave before it's too late." Reading those words sent a chill down my spine. What had Tara been so afraid of? I shared the journal with the police, but it didn't provide any concrete answers. They continued their investigation, but the trail had gone cold. As time passed, the memory of that night faded for everyone except me. I couldn't let it go, haunted by the unknown. I often found myself staring out into the darkness, listening for those faint noises, wondering if Tara was out there somewhere, lost and scared. My friends tried to comfort me, but the mystery remained unsolved. Tara was gone, and we might never know what happened to her. The dinner party that had ended happily for the rest of us had left a shadow over my life, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary moments can turn into the most inexplicable mysteries. In the quiet moments, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I still think of Tara and that fateful night. The unanswered questions linger, a ghost that refuses to be laid to rest. And so, I continue to search for answers, hoping that one day the mystery will be solved and Tara's story will finally have an ending. This happened about 17 years ago when I was just a kid. I was with my best friend, Marcus, at an old, abandoned resort in Alaska. The place was hidden off a busy main road. You had to drive down a private dirt path to get there. The property was large and had many old buildings. There were at least 10 small cabins, a main hall, several bathroom buildings, and even an indoor pool house. Outside, there was a pool, a shuffleboard area, and a playground for kids. Everything looked very old and run down. Tall, overgrown grass covered most of the area. We had discovered this place by chance one day while walking along Route 409, but we did not explore it then. We decided to come back another night. That night, it was well past sunset. The sun was just saying good night as it disappeared behind the sky. It was very dark, but we chose to come at night because we were afraid of getting caught during the day and being charged with trespassing. We brought walkie-talkies and flashlights so we could talk to each other when we split up to explore. Together, we started checking out the cabins. Most of them looked the same. Small cabins with 1 or 2 beds, a tiny kitchen, 1 bathroom, and sometimes a small living area. After looking through several cabins, I split off from Marcus because he was moving a bit too slowly. I went to try and enter a building that looked like the main hall or office, but every door was locked. I used my walkie-talkie to tell Marcus that the big building was locked, but I did not get a reply. I wondered if I had moved too far away for him to hear me. About 2 minutes later, I came upon one of the bathroom buildings. It was not very big, maybe around 400 square feet. There were no doors on this building. Instead, it had 2 large open entrances, one for the men's room and one for the women's room. I noticed the signs were faded and worn out. Then I saw red marks on the dirty old concrete floor. I won't say they looked exactly like bloody footprints, but I could not explain what those red tracks were then. And even now, I cannot be sure. It was pitch black inside that bathroom area around one of the corners, and that was the first building that made me feel truly scared. I tried to call Marcus again on my walkie-talkie, hoping he was close by. I pressed the button and said, "Yeah, where are you?" When I let go, I heard the beep sound that comes after a message is sent from inside the bathroom. That sound nearly gave me a heart attack. I thought maybe Marcus was already inside. That might explain the red marks I had seen. I called his name, and my voice echoed in the empty space. I was about to step into the bathroom, thinking Marcus might be hiding to prank me, when I suddenly heard his voice from behind me, outside in the dark. I could not see him, but I knew he must have seen my flashlight beam, so I shouted, "I found your walkie-talkie." I started to step into the building, but then I heard him clearly say, "Don't go in there. I never went in there." At that moment, I turned around and ran out of the bathroom as fast as I could. I pressed my walkie-talkie button again and heard that same beep coming from inside the dark area of the women's room. Marcus and I looked at each other for a brief moment before we both dashed back the way we had come. We finally made it back to Route 409 and had to stop to catch our breath. Then Marcus told me that when he was inside one of the cabins, he had tried to call me over the walkie-talkie, but I did not answer, so we must have been too far apart. Then he said he heard a noise from the living area of that cabin. As he turned around, his flashlight revealed an older woman nearly running toward him. He dropped his walkie-talkie and flashlight and ran out of the cabin in a panic. Marcus ran in the dark and hid. He stayed very quiet, fearing that someone might follow him. He hid for what felt like a long time, until finally he saw my flashlight across the field, near the bathroom building. The most likely explanation I could think of was that a troubled person, perhaps a drug addict, was hiding or living in one of the cabins. For some reason, she lunged at Marcus and took his walkie-talkie. I still do not know why she was in that bathroom. Maybe she was using drugs, or perhaps the bathroom in the cabin did not work properly. But one thing I cannot explain is why there was a trail of red marks that looked like blood on the floor. These are the ideas I have, but I still cannot explain everything that happened that night, and that uncertainty is the scariest part of all. A few years ago, my daughter Emma was brought home very late by her friend Ryan. Emma was 26 at the time and had been out with her friends. I was already in bed when I heard the front door open. I quickly got up to see what was happening. In the living room, I saw Ryan struggling to carry Emma. Emma was very drunk. She could barely stand. Her clothes were messy and her eyes were half closed. Ryan was a tall, strong young man who made it look easy to hold her up. In a calm voice, Ryan said, "I'm sorry about this. Emma had too much to drink." I nodded, my worry for Emma far outweighing any anger I might have felt. "Let's take her to her room," I said as I moved to help. Together, we managed to carry Emma up the stairs and into her bed. She mumbled incoherently, her head lolling to the side. I took off her shoes and tucked her in, hoping that sleep would help her feel better in the morning. Ryan paused for a moment, and before he turned to leave, I said, "Thank you for bringing her home." Ryan replied with a small smile, "No problem. I'll check on her tomorrow." Then he left, and I went back to my room, hoping to get some sleep. The next day, Emma was groggy but otherwise fine. She remembered very little from the previous night, except that she had been with friends and had drunk too much. Life went on as usual, and I did not think much more about that night. 4 months later, everything changed. One evening, I was watching the news when a breaking story caught my attention. The reporter stood in front of a hotel and described a horrible crime that had taken place. My heart sank as I listened. The report said a young man was found dead in his hotel room earlier that day. The victim's name was not released, and it was said that he had been checked into the hotel by a friend the night before. The police were now searching for that friend, who was considered a suspect. I felt a chill run down my spine because something about the story sounded very familiar. The reporter continued, explaining that witnesses had seen the suspect leaving the hotel early that morning and that the police had released a sketch of him. The screen showed a drawing of a man who looked very much like Ryan. My heart pounded as I tried to process what I was seeing. Could it be him? The thought was almost too much to bear. I immediately called Emma. After 3 rings, she answered in a sleepy voice. I said urgently, "Emma, turn on the news. There's something you need to see." A few minutes later, she called back. Her voice was now fully awake and filled with shock. "What do we do?" she asked. I replied, "I don't know, but we need to call the police." We did that right away, and soon detectives arrived at our house to ask questions about Ryan. Emma told them everything she knew about the night Ryan brought her home and about how long they had been friends. The detectives took notes with very serious expressions. Days turned into weeks as the search for Ryan continued. The story was all over the news, and everyone in our small town was talking about it. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. I later discovered that Ryan had not only helped Emma that night, but had also checked another friend into the hotel, only to kill him and then escape. The brutality of the crime was unimaginable. Emma was deeply affected by the news. She could not believe that someone she trusted could do something so terrible. She became withdrawn and spent most of her time in her room. I tried to comfort her, but no words could ease the pain. One night, a few weeks after the news broke, Emma and I sat in the living room. The house was quiet, and the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Emma stared at the floor, lost in thought. Finally, she said, "Mom, do you think I could have been next?" Her question was heavy and terrifying. I did not know what to say. I admitted softly, "I don't know, but you are safe now." I had thought about that possibility too many times, though I had tried to push it away. Eventually, the police found Ryan. He had fled to a neighboring state and was hiding in a rundown motel. His capture brought some relief, but the scars he left behind were deep. The trial was long and painful, with many details of the crime coming to light that were almost too much to bear. In the end, Ryan was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But for Emma and me, life would never be the same. The fear and betrayal we felt cast a long shadow over our days. Emma struggled to move on, haunted by the knowledge that someone she had considered a friend was capable of such evil. Even though years have passed and Emma has tried to rebuild her life, I still see the pain in her eyes, a reminder of the nightmare we lived through. We still talk about that night sometimes, the night Ryan brought Emma home. It serves as a strong reminder of how close we came to losing everything. And even though we try to move forward, the memories of that time still linger in our hearts. When my mom was in her early 60s, she decided to adopt a pet she had always wanted, a Maine Coon cat. She had always loved animals, and now that she was retired, she finally had time to care for one. She named him Max. Max wasn't just a cat, he was practically a companion. My mom trained him in ways I didn't even think were possible for a cat. He responded to simple commands, recognized certain words, and had a way of communicating with her through different meows. He was intelligent, sometimes eerily so. When my mom passed away at 68, my brother and I had to decide what to do with Max. My brother wasn't interested, his wife was allergic, and they had no room for a pet. I couldn't bear the thought of giving Max away to a stranger. He had been my mom's best friend, and in a way, he was a last connection to her. So I took him in. I lived in a one-story house, and I set up Max's favorite perch in the den. He was usually calm, lounging around during the day, and only getting playful in the evenings. At night, he would curl up near my bedroom door, quiet and content. If he ever got restless, I'd let him roam for a bit before settling him back down. For nearly 2 years, Max and I fell into an easy routine. I knew his habits well, when he was hungry, when he wanted attention, and when something wasn't right. And one night, something was very wrong. It was early December, just past midnight, when I woke up to the sound of Max growling. It wasn't a playful growl. It was deep, guttural, something I had never heard from him before. I sat up, heart pounding. Max was near the bedroom door, his ears flattened, fur bristling. His eyes were locked on the dark hallway beyond my room. A chill ran through me. Max never acted like this. I hesitated for a moment before getting up, whispering his name. He didn't turn his head. He was focused, like he was tracking something. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling sound. It was coming from the kitchen. I froze. My mind raced through possibilities. A draft, a stray animal? But no, my doors and windows were locked. Max let out a low yowl, his tail flicking sharply. He started creeping forward, staying low to the ground. I grabbed the closest thing to a weapon, a heavy flashlight from my nightstand, and slowly stepped into the hallway. The air felt heavier, colder. My heart thudded in my chest as I approached the kitchen. Then, in the dim light, I saw it. The pantry door was open, and inside, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure. A person. A surge of adrenaline kicked in. Before fear could paralyze me, I flipped on the kitchen light. The moment the brightness flooded the room, the intruder flinched, an older man, disheveled, his clothes stained and tattered. His bloodshot eyes went wide as he realized he'd been caught. Instinct took over. I lunged forward, shoving the pantry door fully open and slamming the man back into the shelves. He stumbled, knocking over boxes and jars, but before he could regain his balance, I grabbed him and threw him to the floor. He fought back, his hands grabbing at my arms, trying to claw at me, but I was stronger. Pinning him down, I twisted one of his arms back, my pulse roaring in my ears. Max was now yowling wildly, his fur standing on end as he circled us, his tail flicking in agitation. I fumbled for my phone with one hand, keeping the man restrained as I dialed 911. The dispatcher barely had to ask me anything before I shouted that I had an intruder. Minutes later, the police arrived. The man was hauled off in cuffs, disoriented and mumbling. He had no ID, no possessions, just a desperate hunger that had driven him to break into my home and raid my pantry. He had already started eating crackers and peanut butter, making himself at home. If Max hadn't woken me up, I don't know what else that man would have done. As I sat on the couch, shaking from the adrenaline, Max jumped onto my lap, purring softly as if to comfort me. I ran a hand through his fur, whispering, "Good boy." I don't know if it was instinct, coincidence, or something else entirely, but part of me liked to believe that my mom was still watching over me, through Max. Thank you for watching.